The movie begins by showing activities at a gangster headquarters and a drug manufacturing site. Moments later, a man named Damian Nowitzki, who is known as a confidant of the gangster boss named Makek, is seen coming to the headquarters to pick up some goods to be circulated. When Damian met his boss, Makek suddenly accused Damian of betraying him, so Makek planned to finish Damian's life. When Makek's men attacked Damian, he fought back and defeated everyone at the headquarters, including Makek. Makek, who was dying, said that he had found out Damian's true identity and the locations of his wife, so Damian rushed back home. When Damian arrived home, he was shocked to see his house in shambles and find Makek's gang had killed his wife. 1 month later, Damian seemed to be still grieving after his wife's death, and he had even quit his job as a special agent and only spent his days getting drunk at home. One day, Damian was contacted by his old friend Simone Makowiczki, a high school teacher. During the call, Simone said he had something important to talk about, so he asked Damian to come to his house at night. After dark, Damian went to Simone's house to have dinner and talk about the problems Simone was facing at school. Simone explained that many of his students were addicted to illegal drugs and died from an overdose. Simone, who suspected that the circulation of these drugs involved insiders at the school, finally asked Damian for help solving the case because Damian was known as an experienced special agent. Unfortunately, with Damian still in a bad state after the death of his wife, he refused Simone's request and asked his best friend to report the case to the police. Hearing this, Simone explained that he had reported it to the police many times, but the police had never taken any action until now. Nevertheless, Damian refused Simone's request. On the other hand, Kamil Makowiczki, Simone's son who attended the school where his father worked, overheard the conversation between his father and Damian. The following night, Damian was seen at a convenience store buying a drink. Suddenly, he was approached by a group of thugs who took his wallet by force. Damian then got angry and beat up all the thugs. On the other hand, Simone decided to investigate the circulation of illegal drugs by going to a warehouse that he believed to be a storage place for illegal drugs. However, when Simone was about to enter the warehouse, he was caught by one of the dealers. The next day, Damian was watching television at home and saw a news story about Simone's death in a storage shed by suspected suicide. From the news, Simone was thought to be one of the drug dealers who posed as a teacher and distributed the goods at school. After seeing the news, Damian felt guilty because he had refused Simone's request to dismantle the drug case at school. From his analysis, Damian assumed that the group of drug dealers had killed and scapegoated Simone. Not long after, Damian went to Simone's house and tried to calm Simone's wife, saying that her husband was innocent. A policeman also at Simone's house then called Kamil, the son of a drug dealer. Kamil was visibly upset by this and tried to attack the policeman. Seeing that the policeman managed to lock Kamil's attack, Damian asked the policeman to release Kamil. A few weeks later, Damian applied as a teacher at the school where Simone had previously taught, intending to investigate a drug trafficking case and look for evidence to clear the name of his best friend, who was labeled as a drug dealer. When he arrived at the school, Damian was welcomed by the staff and the principal named Mielski, especially since the school was in need of new teachers. Mielski also explained that he wanted to restore the school's image for the better because the school's name became tarnished after Simone's death and the allegations against Simone that circulated. The school even had to hire security agents to prevent the circulation of illegal drugs there. After being officially accepted, not long after, one of the teachers, Agata Kirska, came to the principal's office and introduced herself to Damian. Mielski then asked Agata to introduce Damian as a new teacher to all the teachers and staff there. The next day, Damian started teaching a class. All the students acted like brats and did not respect him as a teacher. One of the students, Roy, did not seem to listen to Damian's orders to lower his legs from the table. Luckily, Agata and a security agent, Leszek Zamoyski, entered the class, so Roy was expelled. At night, Agata, who had finished teaching, planned to go home and was heading for her car in the parking lot. Suddenly, Roy and his group appeared to intercept Agata, and it seemed that Roy had bad intentions toward the teacher. Before Roy could carry out his action, Damian and another teacher named Harry arrived and defeated all of Roy's men, so Roy finally ran away after seeing all of his men battered. Harry himself seemed very impressed with Damian's martial arts skills. Meanwhile, Roy, who had escaped, appears to be captured by a gang of students from the school led by Jero. A few moments later, Leszek came riding a motorcycle in a full racer's outfit and immediately approached them. Leszek was very upset with Roy for misbehaving in class because Roy could threaten the continuity of his business with the group of students for distributing illegal drugs. As a punishment to deter Roy, Leszek did not even hesitate to beat Roy up and break his legs. The next day, the teachers checked the CCTV that showed Damian's actions the night before, and all the teachers were amazed. Mielski also thanked Damian for saving Agata. As the class was about to start, Leszek suddenly approached Damian, who asked who he really was. Damian calmly replied that he was just an ordinary history teacher and left Leszek to teach the class. As soon as Damien entered the classroom, it turned out that all the students knew Damien's previous actions, so they asked him to teach them martial arts. Damien, who saw the students' enthusiasm, finally agreed and began training his students during recess. The students seemed to enjoy the training session. Even Kamal, who had just entered school after his father's death, joined in the training. After the martial arts training, Damien was seen meeting Kamal in the dressing room. Kamal, who was still sad about Simone's death, was angry with Damien for refusing to help Simone to investigate the case of drug trafficking in the school so that his father had to die during the investigation. Kamal said that if Damien had been willing to help Simone, his father would not have died and been accused of being a drug dealer. Damien tried to calm Kamal down by explaining that his arrival as a teacher at the school was to investigate the case and clear Simone's name. In the evening, Damien went with Agata to a bar, and the two seemed attracted to each other. After chatting, Damien intends to get a new drink until he sees some men harassing one of the bar patrons. Damien immediately asked the men to stop bothering the patrons there, but the group of men attacked Damien instead, so he fought back, and a scuffle ensued. Agata, who saw how Damien's defeated the men at the bar, became increasingly interested in him and invited him to continue drinking at her apartment. When Damien was waiting for Agata, who was preparing drinks, he suddenly remembered his wife, who gangsters killed, so he decided to leave Agata's house immediately. Meanwhile, Agata was quite surprised because she saw Damien had left her house without saying goodbye. On his way home, Damien accidentally saw a student from his school doing a drug deal. Damien immediately approached the student and asked where the student could get the goods. The student remained silent and did not tell Damien anything because he was afraid of being hurt by his boss. Damien finally let the student go and thought of another way to uncover the drug trafficking case at his school. The next day, a student named Amelia was arguing with Jero because her best friend had become an addict after using drugs sold by Jero and his group. Jero, who doesn't care about it, asks his men to bully Amelia. Kamal came to save Amelia not long after, but Jero's men beat him up. All students who saw the incident were threatened not to report the incident to the school, or Jero and his group would hurt the student who complained. When in class, Damien saw Kamal's face was battered, so he asked who had done this to Kamal. However, Kamal only replied that he fell and got hurt. Damien certainly didn't believe it and asked other students, but none of the students in the class wanted to open their voices. Amelia only answered that none of them dared to complain about who the real perpetrator was because they were afraid the perpetrator would attack them. Another student added that they wanted to learn self-defense to protect themselves and not be afraid to fight bullies. Damien, who heard this, asked his students to come to a warehouse after school. After all the students arrived in a messy warehouse, Damien immediately asked his students to clean up the warehouse, which they would later use for martial arts training. The students were very excited and immediately tidied up the warehouse. A few days later, the warehouse was finally ready for use, and all the students regularly practiced there after school with Damien. On the other hand, Agata often seems to avoid Damien after his sudden departure from her house without saying goodbye some time ago. As night fell, Damien kept an eye on Jero and his group of suspected drug dealers at the school. One day, Damien finds drugs in a locker that will be distributed at school. With his ingenuity, Damien tricked a few group members into getting caught by the police, which Damien called to come there. Unfortunately, without Damien realizing it, Lesek secretly watches everything he does. One day, after Damien finished training his student in martial arts, some masked men came to the warehouse and immediately attacked Damien. With Damien's martial arts skills, he easily defeated all the masked men. The next day, at school, Damien, who met Lesek's men, realized that they were the masked men who attacked him last night after seeing some scars on their faces. From a distance, Jero tells Lesek he has an idea to get rid of Damien so as not to disrupt their business again. At night, Jero appears at Amelia's house and threatens Amelia to confess to being the victim of Damien's abuse. If she refuses the request, Jero and his group will not hesitate to hurt her father. Amelia, who had no choice, agreed to the plan. The next day, Damien, who had just entered the school, saw teachers and students gathered in a hallway. Suddenly, Mielski forbids Damien to enter his classroom and punishes him for some time for not teaching there because Damien has harassed Amelia after school at the martial arts training center. Mielski, who looked disappointed, finally asked Lesek and his men to expel Damien from the school. Because Damien felt he was being framed, he sneaked into Amelia's room at night to ask why Amelia had made a false report to the school. Amelia then explained that Jero threatened her to do this because if she refused, her father would be in danger. After learning about this, Damien decides to go to the hospital and meet Roy, who is still recovering after getting attacked by Lesek and Jero the other day. Damien, who had met Roy, immediately asked how illegal drugs could circulate freely at school. Roy, who felt betrayed by Lesek and Jero, told him everything, including information on all the illegal drugs produced at school. After hearing the information from Roy, Damien immediately headed to the school to prove the truth. Once there, Damien saw a suspicious person enter the school laboratory. Damien immediately followed the man secretly. And surprisingly, he saw a chemistry teacher named Titus mixing illegal drugs in the laboratory. Not long after, Damien saw the person in the lab carrying all the items out of the school, photographed them as evidence, and immediately followed the car used to transport them. While following the car, Damien realized that all the illegal drugs that had been made in the lab would soon be shipped via a dock. Unfortunately, Damien's actions were spotted when he tried to check the contents of a container that he believed was where the drugs were stored. Damien ended up having to fight several people there. He also contacted Agata and Mielski about everything he had seen that night. The next day, Mielski calls in the chemistry teacher and some of Lesek's men that Damien saw last night. After explaining the report Damien gave, Titus denied that he was mixing drugs at school. Titus explained that his presence in the lab last night was only to clean the glue and asked some school security agents to dispose of the remaining chemicals used. Since Damien did not have any solid evidence, Mielski eventually deemed that it was all a misunderstanding, and Titus and the others were cleared of the charges. After the incident at school, Agata visited Damien at his house in the evening. When Agata arrived at his house, Damien asked if she was still disappointed with him for suddenly leaving her and harassing his student. Agata calmly replied that she knew that Damien was innocent of the harassment charges because she had also met Emilia, who told her the truth. Damien then explained that he suddenly left Agata because he still remembered his late wife even though he also liked Agata. Not only that, but Damien also told her about his goal of becoming a teacher at the school to investigate drug trafficking cases and clear Simone's name. After hearing Damien's explanations, Agata was willing to help him. To start the investigation, Damien and Agata met Titus secretly to ask where the drugs were kept. Before Titus could speak, Lesek suddenly arrived on a motorcycle and shot Titus dead in the head. The following night, Agata returned to Damien and handed over a note belonging to Simone. In Simone's note, he drew a map leading to a warehouse, so Damien and Agata assumed that the warehouse was where the drugs Simone had found before his death were stored. With that clue, the two rushed to get there. On the other hand, from a distance, Lesek was watching Damien and Agata. Once Damien and Agata arrived at the warehouse, Damien had to face Lesek's men, who had been waiting for him there. After defeating Lesek's men, the two finally found a pile of illegal drugs ready to be distributed. Suddenly, they were surrounded by Lesek, Jero, and his group, and even Mielski, who turned out to be the leader of the circulation of these goods at school, appeared there. Mielski said that Damien and Agata would end up dead in that warehouse, just like Simone, who tried to find out about the circulation of the goods in the school. Luckily, Kamal and all of Damien's students taking martial arts training also came there and helped their teacher defeat the drug dealers. Not long after, a fight ensues, and Kamal has even been able to defeat Jero, who once bullied him. Meanwhile, with his martial arts skills, Damien was also seen defeating Lesek. A few moments later, Damien immediately met Mielski, who was now holding Agata hostage with a gun. Luckily, Agata managed to rebel, and Damien took the opportunity to beat Mielski to the ground. However, when Damien and Agata were caught off guard, Mielski reached for his gun and shot Damien in the arm. Just before Mielski was about to shoot Damien a second time, unbeknownst to Mielski, Kamal had brought a pile of porcelain and dropped it on Mielski's head, killing him. At the movie's end, the police come to the location to secure the place. From the police findings, the police know that Simone is innocent of drug trafficking. After explaining everything to the police, Damien met Kamal, who helped him crack the case. The moral that can be learned from this movie is that sometimes our biggest enemies are around us without us knowing.